Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, founder of an international movement art program called the Nia Technique. You are listening to Get In. This is a podcast about conversation. Now, today we're exploring nourishment. Now, I'm not talking about just food. I'm talking about the many ways in which a body, a psyche, our emotions, a spirit, how they're fed or how they're starved. We're exploring how the body knows and how the gut, that gut instinct maybe you've had, how does it know truth? Often called our second brain, our gut speaks to us through sensation, instinct, hunger, fullness, tightening, and also softening. Now, the gut nourishment, this is where I first met and first judged what I was feeling. I had no idea that there was a part of me that was helping me to make choices and decisions, to decide, Debbie, is this safe? Is this enough? Can I receive this? So today I want to talk about listening to that intelligence. Our topic is something that we all live with: food, a body, nourishment. And often silently, often tenderly, life in a body and how we come to know ourselves through nourishment, not by just what we eat, but how we're fed, how we love, how we create safety for ourselves, touch, meaning, belonging. What happens with all of those forms of nourishment if they're missing, if they're interrupted, or even if they're hard for us to personally receive? These experiences, from touch to love to food, they get digested. Love can settle in our gut. Fear can restrict it. Touch can soften us. Chronic deprivation of care, safety, and tenderness can leave our gut feeling braced, our whole being feeling guarded and unable to trust what's coming in. But the gut remembers. The conversation about nourishment in all its forms and the way the body speaks when the soul is asking to be fed. This is the conversation we're going to have. It's about longing and restraint, what we allow in and what we keep out, about nourishment and deprivation, care, control, and our relationship with things like food, touch, love, and self-trust. At the level of the gut, well, this becomes instinct. Instinct tell us when to open, when to close, when to take in, and when to say no. And when instinct is overridden, why? Well, because of trauma, control, cultural rules, or shame, the body often speaks through hunger, fullness, or the absence of both. Our conversation today is an exploration of how the body becomes the place where unmet needs, unspoken stories, and a longing for wholeness are expressed and lived. Now, for those of you that are Nia movers, you understand that we look at the body as something unique and diverse, as the person who lives inside that body. We know that health is not created by food alone, that a body needs love and touch, meaning, movement, creativity, rest, recognition, and definitely joy. When these forms of nourishment are missing or interrupted, the body will speak, sometimes quietly, sometimes dramatically. Is an eating disorder only a problem with food? I don't think so. I believe it reflects what the body and spirit are not receiving. I also believe it reflects a disrupted relationship with gut instinct, the body the body's way, with the body's ability to trust its own signals. When the gut no longer feels safe to speak, the body finds other ways to communicate. So, what if the absence of nourishment, emotional, relational, creative, and soulful, creates a hunger that food alone cannot satisfy? Where do we go? What do we do to feel nourished and whole? Today, we're asking these deep questions about where nourishment stops, where disconnection begins, and how healing becomes possible. We're exploring what happens when the psyche and the spirit lose access to love, tenderness, self care, and embodied joy, and how the road back is paved with life force, the restoration of communication between the feminine and masculine within us. The feminine is the listening, receiving, sensing, feeling. The masculine is the one protecting, structuring, acting, discerning. They are the sacred twins. And the gut is where this dialogue lives. It senses before the mind understands, it knows before words form. When the listening intelligence of the feminine and the discerning action of the masculine come back into relationship in the gut, instinct becomes guidance instead of impulse. Wisdom instead of control guides, and the body no longer has to speak through suffering. What many of us may not yet relate to is seeing struggles with life, body, food, and the body not as failures. What happens when we see these things as portals, gateways into consciousness, wisdom, and as a deeper relationship with our body and our authentic self? My guest today is a wise woman, Dr. Anita Johnston, a clinical psychologist, a certified eating disorder specialist, and a true pioneer in the field of eating psychology and body image for over 35 years. She walks her talk, she knows her stuff. She's the author of the internationally beloved book, Eating in the Light of the Moon. I love that title. It's published in 7 languages. She's also creator of the Light of the Moon Cafe, which is an online sanctuary offering interactive courses, self-study, and a supportive global community for those individuals navigating eating and body image challenges. Anita is the founder and executive clinical director of Ipono, Hawaii, a residential eating disorder treatment program on Maui, where healing is approached with depth, dignity, and soul. She provides virtual individual consultations, leads workshops, and she's best known for her extraordinary ability to weave, and I love this, metaphor, myth, symbolism, and storytelling into psychology, making the complex inner landscape of eating and body image accessible, meaningful, and deeply human. So today we're exploring how addressing negative body image and disordered eating can become that gateway I talked about, not just to healing, but to higher consciousness, inner guidance, and life that is rich, meaningful, and fulfilling. So I want to ask this question. What if you take a moment, consider that your body is not the enemy, but the messenger? It's your partner. What if food is not the hunger? And hunger, fullness, control, and longing are languages of the soul spoken through the gut. We can feel it, we can sense it. What if healing begins not by just fixing the body, but by restoring trust in the deep, deep intelligence? Now, before we begin our conversation, I'd like to invite everybody listening, including you, Anita, to pause for a moment and let's just simply arrive and sense. Now, you don't really need to do anything. I want you to just smell the moment. You can close your eyes, just sip the air, and notice that you are here. You're in your body and you're breathing. And now imagine for a moment that the body is not just parts in a machine. It's not a problem to be fixed, not a project to be perfected. Imagine the body as a house, a home, a house with many rooms, some filled with light, some rooms long closed, some carefully kept, some holding hunger and waiting. And imagine that at the center of this house is the gut, the place where life is first met, where experience is digested, where the body decides yes or no, safe or unsafe, enough or not enough. This house was built with deep wisdom. It knows how to breathe, how to adapt, and how to protect itself. The gut knows when it has been fed and when it has been forgotten. It remembers what has been nourishing and what has been too much, too little, or too soon. Now imagine that food is only one doorway into this house. Love is another, touch another, rest another, joy, meaning, movement, creativity, each their own doorway. And imagine what happens when one doorway is used again and again, while others remain locked, unseen, or unsafe to enter. The house doesn't collapse, it adapts. It tightens, it numbs, it braces in the gut. It creates patterns to survive. And sometimes it speaks in the only language it believes will be heard. So take a breath, smell the moment, and sense where in your body, especially in your gut, where is there a hunger that food alone cannot satisfy? Name that hunger. All right, when you're ready, just let your eyes open. Maybe rub your hands together. Get yourself back here. We're ready to dive into that conversation. Welcome, Anita. Thank you so much for joining me.
I am so happy to be here, and already I got so excited listening to you. It's like, "Okay, let's go."
Well, I want to begin by acknowledging how deeply your work has influenced not only the field of psychology, but the way you have helped people relate to their bodies, their hunger, and their inner knowing, especially the wisdom that lives in their gut. Your use of story, archetype, and metaphor, it feels like a remembering, as though you're guiding people back to a truth they've always carried within them, and knowing that it's felt before it's thought and sensed before it is explained. So many people arrive at struggles with food and body believing that something's wrong with them, often because they've learned to distrust their body, their gut instincts, and bodily signals. What you offer is a radically different invitation, one that recognizes meaning intelligence and even initiation happening beneath the surface of experiences. Your life's work has been about listening to these inner houses, about hearing what the body is expressing beneath behavior, beneath symptoms, beneath food, about listening to the gut as a messenger rather than a problem to be managed. So I'd love to begin asking you, when you listen to the stories people tell you through their bodies, through eating, restricting, controlling, or numbing, what do you hear the body and especially the gut asking for that goes beyond food?
Yeah, because I think our gut tunes into, and I believe it is how we connect with physical and non-physical hungers. And so when I use the language of metaphor, which is the language of our stories, which is why it's so familiar to us, that creates a bridge where we can access those non-physical hungers, but it's through our gut that we first sense them. And unfortunately, because we live in a culture that's so literal, we have stories in it that say, "Oh, that's nonsense," or "Oh, I'm overreacting," or "I'm being too sensitive." And then we have people that either out of ignorance or because they have their own agendas are happy to collude with our dismissal, denial, devaluing of that information coming from the gut.
Yeah, the dismissal, the denial, is interesting. I find that when individuals make a decision, this is this and this is that, they're kind of done. I've taken care of it. I put a bow on it and put it away, right? And yet, it is the denial and the dismissal that we want to dig into. Why the denial? Why the dismissal? Now, I have found in blending together physical and non physical resistance to believe that we have a physical body and an energy body that has its own anatomy, right? How do you educate people beyond just saying that there is a physical and a non-physical meaning for what's happening to you?
Again, that's where, for me, the language of metaphor is really helpful. So, if someone is struggling with eating, I might say, okay, I want you to imagine that you have two tanks, tank A, tank B. Let's keep it simple, right? And tank A is the tank you fill when you need physical nourishment, you fill it with food. Tank B is the tank you feel when you need emotional or spiritual nourishment, and you fill it with things like attention, affection, meditation, movement, prayer, and so on. And so we have to be able to tease the two tanks apart because no amount of food is going to fill tank B. And so we need to be able to understand the difference between these different appetites that we have.
I love the visual of the two tanks and bringing those two tanks to life by asking us to personally relate to the measurement of our tanks. Um, Not only what do we need to keep tank A physical healthy, and what do we need, right? Personalizing, what do we need to keep our tank B healthy? And I would imagine for a lot of people, the idea that food is one kind of nourishment, but emotional nourishment, safety, dignity, belonging, love, touch, that nourishment is equally important. That is like an aha moment. Do you have a story that you can reflect on and share with us where you actually saw the light bulb go off in someone that you were working with?
Yes. And now we have the neuroscience that explains what's going on, but way back when, 30, 40 years ago, when I was just trying to figure out what's going on here, and I would use a metaphor, or I'd use a story, I would see what I called the lights going off in someone's eyes. And we know that, right? We've seen that when we see that little spark. And now we know, now science tells us it's actually the anterior superior temporal gyrus right over your right ear, shooting out a blast of gamma waves, creating new neural pathways in your brain, right? But back then, I just knew it in my gut and I could sense and see the lights coming on. And so we use that metaphorically, right? Even in our cartoons, we have a little light bulb
Right.
right on top of the head. So there's something about the light that is not just enlightening in terms of illumination, but also in terms of levity. Things lighten up. So I've had many experiences, which is why I started using stories and metaphors to try to explain something that was difficult to explain. And then I would notice, I would see the light. I would see the lights come on.
Yeah, that personalization that happens with story and with metaphor, it seems like such an organic way to share what could go over somebody's head, right? And but that connection, making that connection, that's that opening the doorway and livening someone's curiosity. I love connecting the idea of seeing the light in someone's eyes as a recognition that something has happened in the brain, something has happened in the gut, and that there's a signal that we can not only see, but we can sense that some kind of magical communication and transmission has happened. Do you find that story and metaphor help people feel safe enough to then maybe reconnect with their body's messages, their gut to listen, maybe with less fear or shame?
I think so, because I think what happens is so I might use a metaphor, tell a story that maybe I've told 100 times, but how it lands on each person is individual to them. So something happens where there's a resonance with their inner truth, which is, again, we experience as the lights coming on that makes it theirs. Is not mine any longer, right? And so that I think provides the safety because it's coming from them. It's coming from their own inner knowing, their own recognition of what is true for them because they feel it. It's not anything I'm saying. They feel it and then they know it.
Beautiful. Now, when you talk about body image or eating disorders, let's talk about a healthy population and their body image and eating disorders, right? Um, we have so many medications now available for people to control their eating, to control their body shape, etc. Um, where do you think we're going as a human species in terms of honoring this gift of body, this beauty of body?
Well, I'm an optimist. So even though I
Good.
work in this field, I see that where we're going is someplace spectacular. And I see this happening with, yes, there is the struggle, but in my experience, those who struggle with disordered eating, negative body image, if they stay the course and dive deep and get to what's driving it, they become the people the world has been waiting for. And
Yeah.
I believe this with every fiber in my being because as they tap into that with curiosity and compassion, they're able to deliver what the world needs now more than anything else, which is compassion and curiosity. And then I believe what happens is people start to see, not with these eyes, but with their inner eyes, that we are so much more than we ever thought. And those judgments about our bodies become less and less significant. They even start to fall away. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, the statement, "Love your body." It's so easy to say,
Yeah.
right? It's a command, and yet to actually do that and mean it, right? To have meaning behind it. And, I describe my purpose is inspiring people to feel, to heal. Um, and, from my own personal experience, I know how scary it can be to really feel, to open up to the totality of the messages that my body has to send me. Because I'm going to get the real deal and I'm going to get truth. And if I'm scared, my body's gonna let me know, and if I'm happy, it's gonna let me know, and if I wanna get divorced, it's gonna let me know, right? And it's like, do I really want the truth?" Right? When the truth is what the body works with. We're the ones that distort the reality to support some story or belief system we got going on. But the body, that gut instinct will tell us the truth. That light, that sensation of, the truth is. Um, how do you work with truth and untruth when somebody has dug in so deep to, "I can't do this," or "I can't do this," or "That's how it is"?
I think one of the first things I do is slow it down, right? It's like if you're driving along and you get in the fast lane and things start getting really shaky, it's
Yeah.
like, well, you don't have to just get out of the car, just move over and slow down. So I think it's important for people to understand that, yeah, those messages from the body, if you start getting really tense, it may be a message to you don't have to do this all right now. You can slow down and move at a pace that's comfortable for you. So
Yes.
it's done step by step with your body being the guide, not the tyrant or not the troublemaker.
Give it you really bring up such a great point about giving control, right? Control is such an issue for people. We talk about it as an illusion. And if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? Um, but yet the control in from my experience is watching somebody in a sense use their consciousness to direct. And we can do that, and yet our unconscious is making a whole lot of decisions for us, a whole lot of guidance. And part of the healing process that I've witnessed is really getting out of the way. So how do you help us human beings let go of control?
Yeah, it's really letting go of the illusion of control, okay? Because there are certain things we do have some control over, but there's other things we don't. And life and other people will always misbehave. That's a given, right? So we
Right.
start with that premise. And the metaphor that I like to use is imagine that you're going down a, a hill in the trunk of a car and it's a twisty, windy road, so you're getting tossed about. It's dark, it's scary, it's terrifying. Now imagine same car, same road, but this time you're behind the wheel. Now you have some agency here. You can take the turns tighter or wider, move faster, slower. You have some saying when to step on the brakes. And so it's a very different experience, even though it's the same car and the same road. And so, I mean, people diss Freud a lot, but really the brilliance of Freud is that he discovered the unconscious. And then Jung came along and said, yeah, the unconscious really is unconscious, right? It's out of our awareness. So the task then is how to bring this unconscious stuff that is driving us, that is impacting us, into conscious awareness so you have some agency, you have some choice. And so I think first of all, understanding that there is stuff going on that we're not aware of, that's just automatic in our psyche. And then again, the irony for me is that for many people, the way they understand that there's stuff going on is they may have disordered eating thoughts or behaviors or body image thoughts. And that's a signal. Okay, right there, right now, there is a belief that's driving you that's not conscious. Then you can bring in the curiosity. What might that be?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is that the unconscious wisdom moves at such a faster rate than conscious wisdom. I can't remember what the numbers are, something like 400,000 bits per second, right? Versus 2,000 bits per second in the consciousness. And yet, your first suggestion, slow down,
Yeah.
giving us control, as you said, not in the trunk, but now behind the wheel. And that you now allow us to get behind the wheel of our own body and life now by slowing down. And by slowing down, I believe, at least with movement, I notice that I am able to then begin to trust the wisdom of my body, this unconscious, beautiful gut instinct that is always leading me if I can listen, if I can partner with. And so the slowing down, and yet in the slowing down, that's where we begin to observe and sense and notice what's happening, which for some individual, I would imagine it could be frightening. Is that a fact?
Yeah, and so a lot of times I say push the pause button. You don't have to come to a screeching halt, right? Push the pause button and slowing down. Those are the favorite words of the soul because the soul is about depth, right? It's not that fast pace. And I think the question that I get most often is, well, how can you tell the difference between your intuition and your fear? Right? And
Yeah, yeah.
this is a really important one to sort down, and it's very hard to describe because we're dealing with sensation and frequency. And so the sensation of fear is contracting, it's jagged, it's intense, it's harsh. The intuition is quieter, it's deeper, it's slower, it's smoother
Yeah.
and more expansive. And so then the task is okay, if that inner voice says, don't get on that plane, is that your phobia or is that your intuition? And so
Right.
right? But I think it's really important for us because for so long, intuition, gut instinct has been dismissed as crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And yet we know, why did I pick up the phone just as that person called? Or when we say, I know I shouldn't have done that. We know of the existence, but we haven't yet cultivated our ability to really discern what's the difference between our old fears and an inner knowing. So I think that's challenging.
Yeah, and it definitely, and I love how you weave together what I call the body's way, that the body has a form and it has a function. To be able to become body literate, we learn how to read the messages of the body and follow them. And your use of language is so very important in relationship to story and metaphor, but a body-centered language, a somatic language, so that um, you help me just with what you just said be able to recognize the sensation and the differentiation between a fear sensation, tighter, contracted, right, versus the um, intuition, which is softer, a little more space, a little more fluid. And then I can check in with my body sensation, the voice of the body, to find out, huh, so you've provided a measurement tool to say, was it this or was it that? And that comparison is so very important, particularly in the healing process, and particularly when working with someone that is helping to facilitate the healing path with you. To be able to have a shared language, I think, is so important. So I really, really love that. Um, what have you learned about? You talk about the soul's journey through decades of listening to stories about food, body, gut. What have you learned about the soul's journey?
Well, what I've learned is that's who we really are, right? And so we come here, who knows where from? I don't know, from not some non-physical reality, whether it's the ethers or heaven or the stars, I don't know. But we come here and we get ourselves a body because we need to maneuver in this third dimensional reality. And we get ourselves a mind that is supposed to help us navigate. But what happens sometimes, because it's a story, our soul's life is a story,
Right.
things start to go wrong. And often what happens is the mind usurps the knowing of the soul and the body. Because the way I think of it, and this is the Jungian terms which I studied with, is that the soul is spirit embodied. And so that's our non-physical spiritual self, but it has a body. So that the soul is both matter and spirit. And so starting to go into that, our soul is the part of ourselves that notices, right? So when you notice those sensations, who's the you that's noticing? That's your soul self. And the more you notice, the stronger your connection gets to your authentic self. And your identity is more with that, then a lot of these other issues start to fall by the wayside.
Yeah. And the soul, I love how you use the word noticing, the part of us that notices. And the soul will not judge.
No, it
It's,
only loves.
again, it's a big difference in what is the sensation of the soul speaking. So give us some words of how can I discern the difference between the soul speaking or my judgmental self speaking? What would my body messages be?
The body messages would be contraction. When you're judging, there's a tightness, because there's a holding on to what's correct or what's incorrect, rather than just being witness to. And what happens most often is we judge our emotions. So
Yeah.
they start to rise, and we don't want those yucky ones because they're uncomfortable, like anger and sadness and fear. And so then using our body, actually, we do try to suppress. If we're really good at it, we can repress, which is when you do it unconsciously.
Mhm.
So when you're suppressing, you go, "Well, I don't want to think about that. That bothers me." When you're repressing, you don't even realize, but the body knows. The body knows that this is going on.
Yeah.
And so I think no, noticing without judgment, the best words to use are, "I wonder." I wonder what's going on with my foot. I wonder why this situation stirs up so much anger in me. I wonder what they meant when they made that comment. So when you wonder, you haven't, like you said earlier, you haven't like sealed it up and wrapped it with a bow and said, this is how it is. You're staying open. And that's when we get the information from our inner guidance system.
That's that inner guidance system that you talk about, that instinctual, emotional, intuitive
Yeah.
place.
Yes.
Um, when you think about illness, now this is just your personal opinion, right? Because I have a personal opinion on this. How much of illness do you think is psychosomatic?
I don't know because I can't think in terms of percentages, but I do know from my own experience that I can, even as a child, I can get myself sick. I remember my mother was quite strict about going to school. And um, if we wanted to stay home, that meant staying in bed. You were
Right.
sick,
Right.
right? And then I would actually start to feel sick, even though I knew I was faking it. And so I just know that from very early on that we have this power. I have healed myself
Yeah.
from some very severe situations that medical science said you couldn't by really working with it in a whole other way, working with the energy around that. So I know about that. However, I think in some ways it's dangerous territory when
Yeah.
people assume. So they might say, well, oh, yeah, you created your breast cancer. It's like, ooh, that to me is so not valid. Now, my personal opinion is that at the soul level of consciousness, even maybe before we incarnate here,
Right.
we may choose certain physical challenges for our
Yeah.
soul's growth, because that's
Yeah.
all the soul cares about is growth. At the personality level, we would never choose something like that. So I think it's really dangerous when people say to other people, well, you chose that. So I really like to draw a hard, fast line between the things that we do have some power to resolve, but what we can always change. And this came from my early experiences with Viktor Frankl. He was my first teacher in graduate school.
Okay.
And he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which is the most
Yeah.
incredible book. But what
Yeah.
he taught us, that, given his own experience in the Nazi prison camp during World War II, where he lost his entire family,
Yeah.
is that there are things that you cannot change, but you always, even if you've lost everything you've ever held dear to you, the meaning you give to that experience is where your freedom lies.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
I believe that is the case for illness and accidents,
Yeah.
that these things happen for reasons that we don't always have access to, but what we do have access to is the meaning we give to it.
Yeah. I love how you put together the word freedom and meaning. Um, to be free of the stories and constraints of culture or imposed by other people or shoulds or shouldn'ts, to be free to stand alone on in your body, your diverse and unique body. There's no other like yours. And to stand on a path that's just yours. And to realize that we walk that path alone in some ways, even though we're surrounded by others walking their own path. What we see in front of us is a blank slate and an opportunity to define the meaning of our life, the meaning of everything that happens in our life, and to take ownership of our story. I think is so very important to feel proud of our story, to come to some level of understanding of what's happening in our life. This is where it doesn't matter whether somebody walks into the room and says, you have this and you have 2 weeks, right? All of a sudden, it's like it's information. How am I going to write that story, right? What am I going to do with it? Is such a very important part. And for me, this is where I feel that the divine feminine shows up. The reminder that we're not alone, right? That we birthed ourselves, right? With this twin energy, feminine, masculine, and we can continue to rebirth ourselves in some way. Um, how do you work with the language of the feminine in the process of working with people with body image and eating disorders? Is the feminine a word you stay away from? I relate it to receptivity, intuition, creativity, embodiment, and to help us not just live from the mind, but live from this whole sensory being.
Yeah, it's not a word I stay away from. However, I'm always making sure that the way in which I use it is understood. So it's not an adjective, it's a noun. And it's a not a gender, male, female, binary, trans, whatever. We all have a masculine and feminine principle within us. And if I were perhaps living in Asia, I would say yin and yang. But my tradition comes from, I come from an indigenous tradition, and they use the words male and female. And also the Jungian tradition, they use these principles of masculine and feminine because when they show up in our dreams and in fairy tales, they show up in the form of male and female figures. So, but it's important that we understand that we are talking about energetic constellations that for most of us are unconscious. But now I believe people use the word feminine, they understand it more than ever. When I wrote Eating in the Light of the Moon 30 years ago, I was very careful with my language because I was concerned that people would misunderstand. And I think I used the word goddess once,
Uh-huh.
but I did
Right.
use the word moon because that's the symbol for the feminine,
Right.
because it's reflective and it has it's more diffuse in its light. And it's also, it flows, it moves, it's not as constant. It's the emotional, instinctual, intuitive aspects of ourselves. We talk about women's intuition, but really men have it too. It's just that it
Absolutely.
is an aspect of the feminine. You think of the word intuit, into it, right? So the feminine is inner. The masculine is more outwardly focused, action oriented, logical, linear, achievement focus. I think the problem that I discovered early on in working with folks struggling with negative body image and disordered eating is we live in a culture that is so out of balance with these two particular energies, where the masculine has been overemphasized and the feminine devalued, and we've all internalized that. And in my experience, I saw it getting played out with food and eating. So I think where we're at now, and I think it's a very exciting time, is people are starting to understand this and starting to recognize that our freedom lies in bringing the two into balance with a consciousness that can consciously and deliberately choose which energy we want present in the moment.
Yeah, you're really talking about wholeness, balance, and being, and really making that choice for ourselves. And how wonderful I think that we live in a time where it feels like there is more space and freedom to explore both your femininity and masculinity, whether it's through how you dress, what kind of, hairdo you have. Um, and I know that as a young 21-year-old who was at home with my first baby, I grew up in a time where it was women's lib and all my friends were out working. And it was lonely. I felt really lonely and almost um, like I had to hide the fact that I like to put on an apron and cook. um, and I've loved watching my two girls have the freedom to really explore who they are, their sexuality, who they are as people, and just being given the opportunity to, I guess, say to choose. So it's like that trunk of the car or behind the wheel. And so I too feel excited. And I think that the extremes that we're seeing right now, black and white, this or that, is that positive tension that's necessary for us to each find our own point on the string or the resonance of This is how I manifest the masculine and feminine. This is how I'm parenting both of those 2 in me. And I think that this can, in the end, create a different kind of mind, body, emotion, spirit alignment that represents a, a, a new kind of healing for humanity. I'm hoping so, anyway.
I think so. I too raised 2 daughters, and this was, in the very early 1980s when they were first born, and I had been a feminist, and so for me, I've always been fascinated by this, and the thought that comes to mind is something that my mentor, Marion Woodman, used to say. She said, "It's better to watch the pendulum than to ride it." Right? Because when you're watching it now, you have a fulcrum, you have a center. And so observing these things, observing which energy is present in me now. Who is
Yeah,
it? Which side of
yeah,
me said that? Boom, brings you into your center, and that is where I see humanity is moving, especially in terms of, what's happening with gender understanding. It's like it's no longer, we're not stuck in these polarities. We recognize it. We haven't yet learned how to find the center, but I think we're headed there. And that for me is really exciting. I'm happy to be on the planet to
yeah.
witness this.
And I am too, actually, even though at times it gets a little scary. Like, what?
That's
Right?
one
Yeah,
variety.
right. I'm writing it. Um, the reference to whether it is to masculine or feminine, or to mother, and father, the importance of having these symbolic inner figures that we can self analyze what part is speaking, what part is missing, what part is stronger. How do you work with the mother and father as archetypes for healing?
Oh, one of my favorite things to do. I
Oh
I
yeah,
spend a lot of time with that. So first of all, looking at mother, um, as an energy, as a verb. So thinking in terms of mothering, that that's the aspect of ourselves, whether we're male, female, that nurtures, comforts, and soothes. And once you learn to understand what that particular energy feels like, you can then find it because it's an archetype, right? An archetype exists within us and outside of us. You can get mothering from your dog. You can get
right.
mothering from your husband. You can get mothering from a coworker, a friend. You can get mothering from Mother Nature.
Yep.
That's why we say Mother Nature. We don't say Father Nature. At a deep level, we understand that. I work a lot with mothering because the wires get crossed with people struggling with food because food is the concrete physical symbol of mother. Ing.
Yeah.
Think of our first experience on the planet. We're in distress. What are we given? The breast or the bottle, and we're soothed. So we're hardwired for that. And that's not a problem unless that's the only place you think you can get mothering, or you think the only place you can get mothering is from your biological mother or the woman who raised you. And if she's not available or willing or not on the planet, then you're screwed, right? But when you can find that that particular energetic lives inside of you, you can draw on that, and that can point you towards where else it is in your life. And so, with it was Carl Jung that said people that were alcoholics really they were longing for spirit, but they reached for the spirit in the bottle. Marion Woodman said that people with disordered eating are trying to get mother in the food, and I moved it to mother ing because it's clear for me that way. And so then I started to think, well, what is father? What is fathering energy? And it seems to be security and protection, the ability to move confidently and safely out in the world. And the concrete physical symbol of it, I believe, is fat, which is why we have such an insane
Oh,
relationship.
say that again. Okay. I wanna hear it for myself, but I want everybody to take it in again. Say it again.
If the concrete physical symbol of Mother Ing is food, the concrete physical symbol of fathering is fat, because that's what provides the security and protection with our bodies.
Wow.
It protects us from famine, it protects us from blows. It protects our neurons. We need fat for security and protection. However, because we live in a patriarchy where the masculine and feminine is so out of balance, we have such an insane relationship with fat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's
That's
how I
a
that's how I work with it.
Oh, that is a great thing to leave everybody with. We may have to do a part 2 of this call and talk about fat, because I love the opportunity to get curious about what you just said. I'm gonna slow down, and I'm gonna get curious about it. Um, as we begin to close, I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak just directly to the listeners. And if there's one core message or a few guiding truths you want people to take away about body image, eating, food, story, metaphor, what would you want them to know?
I want them to know that there's nothing wrong with them, that we all have gifts and challenges. And the challenges need to be examined because we have all these stories that we try to let go of. And the truth is, you can't let go of the stories. But if you investigate them, the stories let go of you. Those that are not true will fall by the wayside.
Mm, that's beautiful. Investigate your stories. Those are not true, will fall away by the wayside. I love it. So, metaphor, symbolism can open the door, as Anita reminds us, to higher consciousness and our physical and, as she said, our non physical being. We can develop a deeper connection to that authentic self and our body's wisdom. I love this by thinking about two tanks. You got tank A, physical nourishment, and you've got tank B, all the other kind of nourishment like emotion and touch and love. And discovery of that inner guidance system. I talk about it as gut instinct, emotions, and intuition. That inner guidance system can help us to move from riding around in the trunk of the car, as Anita said, to getting behind the wheel and to having the best kind of control, understanding that there is a lot of unconscious that's happening. But we can become aware, we can notice, we can get more curious, and therefore we can become more conscious about our choices and decisions. We can recognize the archetype of the divine feminine and her qualities, and also the relationship with the masculine, whether it be mother, nurture through food, father, fat. I love that. We can live each energy to its fullest through our own lived expression of who we are as human beings without label, just souls, spirit embodied in flesh. We can find a better balance between doing and being. And how? We can slow down. This is the first thing Anita said to us: slow down, slow down, so that we can hear and sense the soul. We can notice and we can start to say, I wonder what. Such a great technique and tool. We can pause and create greater mind, body, emotion, spirit alignment. And we can pause and then begin to cultivate a sense of the language of sensation. Is that a fear sensation or is it an intuition frequency? They both have frequencies and they're both sensations that we can begin to observe. I want to thank you very much for listening to Get In. And Anita, how can people find you? And is there anything happening right now that you want to tell people about that they can join in March or after March?
Well, there's a couple places. You can find me at dranitajohnston.com or lightofthemooncafe.com. And at the Light of the Moon Cafe, I have a new crescent moon program, which is the beginning place to start, where you can find out how to use metaphor to get to that deeper unconscious stuff that might be driving struggles with eating or body image.
Lovely. Beautiful. All right. Well, I'm going to leave you all with this body and life, healing. It's about remembering who you are. You are an amazing whole being, a spirit, a soul in this genius body, a gift with a brain and intuitive gut intelligence. It's about learning to listen to this genius, this voice, this wisdom that lives in you. It's always lived in you. It created you. Wisdom there to guide you on your very unique body and life journey that is lived, that is traveled and experienced through a body. I invite you to join 2 weeks free on Nia On Demand. This is where you can find workouts, podcasts, meditations. It's an opportunity to experience movement artistry as an act of love, respect, and devotion to your body and life. Feel free to email your comments to comments@nianaw.com. You can find me at debbierosas.com or on social media at The Nia Technique. Thanks again, and don't forget, this is the most important time in our lives to get into the conversation. I'm Debbie Rosas, and I'll see you next time.